What's up? Welcome back to another Pax What She Said recap episode. Um, I am here with my co-host, obviously, Maggie Loney, and we get to talk about a very fun win. Packers beat the Bears 24-14 on Sunday. It was an early game, so fans could just enjoy the rest of their Sunday after the Packers won. And as always, it is fun to beat the Bears. As Aaron Rodgers says, he owns them, which is not necessarily inaccurate. But it was a great win, good team win. A lot of young guys stepping up in place of many missing starters. Maggie, what were your initial gut reactions?
Well, I would say midway through the first quarter, I felt like there was going to be a lot of deleted tweets on the internet because it definitely felt like there were a lot of overreactions to the first couple drives. But then I think the Packers found their groove. It felt, I don't want to say like a normal Packer game this season, but it felt like, it took a little bit for the offense to find its rhythm. And then they did. And, it was, I guess, what we expected. You and I said on Pack What She Said we thought it would probably be like a 10-point win. And I know it felt a little close in the beginning, but I guess I wouldn't think there were too many surprises.
Yeah, I think in the rewatch it did not feel as close, and maybe because when you're rewatching, you know the outcome of the game, but I felt like watching the Packers always had like a really nice handle on it, and I think it would have been even more dominant if a couple of calls had been made / hadn't been made. I mean, most notably, I think Adrian Amos had an interception that got called back. EQ had a touchdown that for some reason got called back. So the Packers very much sort of dominated this game, I think, over the Bears. But the Bears did run on them better than any team has yet this season, right? Herbert had 97 yards against Packers defense, most that they've given up. Still have yet to give up 100 yards to a running back this season, which, say what you want, they fixed their run defense.
Yeah, I think this maybe is going on a completely different tangent already, but it's interesting. We talk about like the defense, and yes, the tackling is a lot better this season, but it feels like, I don't know if it's like the mantras of Joe Barry and Mike Pettin are so different that Mike Pettin was like, bend, don't break, and then they would shore up in the red zone. And Joe Barry is like, I'm not going to let you get to the red zone, but if you get there, it's kind of like a cakewalk. And I think the Bears were a really good example of that. Like, the Packers kept it in front of them for so long. And the only time that the Bears were really able to put up any points is when they got really close to the end zone. So I just think that's interesting, and obviously something that the Packers defense is going to want to work on, because if you can stop any of those scores and turn them into 3 or force a turnover, that's huge.
Yeah, well, I think the other piece of that to me is when you're giving up good field position on pretty much every return, then that doesn't help your defense, who's not very good in the red zone. That means like they've been very good between the numbers, but not once the other team gets to the 20. And when the return man's getting to the 30, 35, 40 every time, there's just like less room to work in the area in which your defense is performing well. So special teams still a problem.
Yeah, especially when you have, a boho blast. Shout out to our friend Michelle Bruton with the coinage of that term. But yeah, I mean, like, you have players that can flip the field, and it seems like it's more of a coverage issue at this point. And when they asked him about it before, and he said, like, there's times where he can kick longer, but he doesn't want to outkick his coverage because, we've seen what happens when the coverage unit can't get down, and then there's room for these returners to make plays. And the Bears do have a good returner, but I still, it doesn't seem as fixed as maybe we all thought or hoped it could be going into the season.
No, it's definitely not. It's definitely not fixed. Because yeah, I mean, you have to. I think the ideal for this defense is pinning the opposing offenses really deep back in their own territory, and then they don't even have a chance to get to the red zone. I mean, the Packers are what, like 15 for 15 in the red zone, giving up touchdowns. Like, that's not very good. And I think they've played not very good offenses, right? But when we get to the Cardinals or even the Chiefs, Rams, like you can't give up touchdowns, like you said, every single time you get to the 20-yard line. You're going to lose games that way.
I thought it was really interesting. And I know we're kind of starting with the defense instead of the offense, like I guess we normally would, but And I know it's a much smaller sample size, but the 2020 Packers finished 13th in the league on defense with 23 points allowed per game. And right now they're 13th in the league on defense with 22.7 points allowed per game. So I just thought that was really interesting where we're talking about like the improvements that we're seeing and the changes that we need to see made. But like holistically, I think the defense is doing a really good job, especially when you look at, God, so many injuries. Preston Smith obviously leaving after 8 snaps. I know Isaac Yadams wasn't necessarily an injury, but Rasul Douglas stepped up big. So there's a lot of players that are coming in, that were on the street to start training camp and are, looking good in green and gold.
I mean, they ended up with one starter in the secondary for the most of the game in Adrian Amos. Yeah, I think you probably noticed this or appreciated this, but they brought in Henry Black a lot, and I noticed that he was playing down in the box more actually with Devondre Campbell, which I thought was really interesting. I thought he did a really nice job stepping up there too, because when you're down Jair Alexander and Darnell Savage and both Smiths on the line, like I, going into that game, would think they're not going to play very well, but it was very much like a next man up mentality. And it just shows how important the depth is. I think Rogers talked about today on the Pat McAfee show. He was talking more about the offensive line, but you got called up and you just got to do your job. And I was really, really impressed with Black, with Rasul Douglas, with everyone who's gotten probably barely any snaps. I mean, I think they pulled Black in for dime packages and that's it. And he was playing a lot more. So it's nice to see that the depth can step up, but they're going to have to start getting healthier. I mean, this is not a sustainable model.
Yeah, and it's like Roger said, like, if you would have said going into the season with all the losses that you'd have, like the 5-game win streak, especially, I mean, he's adamant. I think the entire team is adamant that week 1 was an anomaly. I think the performance demonstrates that. Like we're seeing that really kind of was a fluky game for them. Week 1s are always weird. But yeah, I mean, it seems like every game they're losing more pieces instead of getting anybody back. And now obviously we're hopeful. David Bakhtiari sounds like he'll be practicing this week. They could get MVS back practicing. It's possible Kevin King can come back. Maybe they'll keep him out until the Cardinals game since that's a really short week next week. But, it seems like they're getting healthy at a good time because this is really, you said it on Pax What She Said, kind of the meat and potatoes of the schedule. Like we're getting into the really tough, daunting middle stretch.
Yeah, and it's good that they're stacking wins now. I think that's something we've stressed the last 5 weeks of the season. But it also means that they need to continue to improve. I wanted to ask you about the inside linebackers because we saw Jalen Smith for the first time this game. It was limited for sure, and they had him in a number of different situations. I definitely saw a lot of controversy around the way he played on Twitter the last couple of days. So I'm curious how you felt he did. I have a couple of thoughts on the way I think Joe Barry can use him, but
yeah, I mean, I think you want him to be around the ball because he's got more speed than most of the players, at that position in Green Bay. But I did feel like, I'd hone in on him during the rewatch and he did kind of seem lost. And I know part of that could be picking up a new defense and, you're kind of thrown into action right away. I think the potential's there. I liked when he came in on blitzes. I think that might be his best use.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I thought when he was asked to cover, he was totally lost. I mean, like flail around a little bit. But when he was asked to rush and to blitz, that he can do really well. And so I think in like very obvious passing down situations, that's probably his best fit until he can maybe get more comfortable in the offense or not. Maybe that's just what he was brought in to do. And honestly, with a pass rush that's missing its best piece, it's nice to have like a little bit of a backup plan there with Jalen Smith. The defensive line played really well. I mean, Kenny Clark is on an absolute tear. I said this on Packer Report TV with Ross yesterday. He's only, I think we're the same age, or he's a year younger than me. He's like 25, 26. He feels like he's been in the league forever. And it feels like he gets better every single year. I mean, the Packers were obviously winning by the time he ends up getting 2 sacks on the same drive on Justin Fields. Like he just gives 100% on every single play. Went full star mode, Mario Kart star mode, is our new analogy. But yeah, I mean, he's getting so much pressure, and I think it's allowing the rest of the line to also make plays off of him.
Yeah, and I mean, for all the talk, about Dean Lowry's cap hit. He's putting together a really strong start to his season. I thought Kingsley Keke had one of his better games. Absolutely agree with you. I mean, Kenny Clark is a monster, but when you get any type of production from the rest of the interior, especially missing, Preston and Z off the edge, Rashawn Gary can push a pocket. We've seen him do that numerous times. I put on Twitter during the game, like, at some point these pressures are going to turn into sacks and then it'll be scary. But, to be as depleted as they were along the defensive line, and for Kenny Clark to have the support that he did, I thought was huge. I thought Jonathan Garvin had a great game.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun to see. And I know the Bears offensive line is not necessarily incredible, but I thought Justin Fields, used his legs more than we've seen from him so far. And I thought that the Packers defense did a good job containing that for the most part.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, going into this game that Justin Fields is going to be used in the run game because that's what he's known for. So I'm glad they were prepared for it. But I agree. I think, again, this was just such a game of like next man up, right? Like you just see Jonathan Garvin in there making plays, and you kind of have the sense like when Preston goes down, okay, so it's Rashawn and who? But it was Rashawn and the whole line. Everyone was able to make some level of an impact. And I think, look, there's something to be said, like you just said, the Bears offensive line isn't very good, but that's when you expect production from them, right? You should be getting to Justin Fields. You should be pushing the pocket, and they did exactly what they were supposed to, especially when the secondary is as depleted as they are. Even more so, you have to lean on that rush. So I think kudos to Joe Barry. I think he schemed up some really interesting things and helped them out. And Justin Fields is no slouch. I mean, he's got an arm. He hit a couple of really, really nice, big time throws. But I think it was just the Packers defense played better than the Bears offense, and that's what we expected. Any more thoughts on the defense before we take a break from one of our sponsors and move to the offense?
Really quickly before we do that, I just, I guess everybody has opinions, right, on the rivalry, whether it's what Aaron Rodgers said, was that appropriate? Is that okay in a rivalry situation? How do we feel about Justin Fields? I want Justin Fields to be a good football player, and I think that he will be a good football player. So I loved, obviously I didn't love it happening against Eric Stokes, but the play he had on the boundary where the ball was in the exact perfect position. Like we saw the growing pains. Anytime he'd get pressure out, he'd just kind of like chuck a Hail Mary into the air and nobody was even around for it. Like, I think you want, as a division, you want your rivals to be good. And obviously it's fun to be like, hey, Aaron Rodgers is 22-5, but if Justin Fields is a good player, that's better for the NFC North long-term. Just like, I mean, Bears fans probably don't want Jordan Love to be good, but you hope, whatever happens with the Packers, that's what makes it fun. And I think the trash talk and stuff is fun until you're on the opposite side of it. And then all of a sudden everybody gets all up in arms about, what is a rivalry and a game and a sport.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I feel this way. You want as many good quarterbacks in the league as possible. If you enjoy football, besides rooting for your own team, then that makes football better. And I think if we can really get like an actual Jordan Love, Justin Fields rivalry. I mean, what we're seeing right now with like Mahomes and Justin Herbert in the AFC West, like those are awesome. Those are fun. And it makes the wins that much sweeter. And like you said, it's great to watch Aaron Rodgers run in a touchdown. I think it's different now at, Rodgers is 37. We don't know how many more of these we're getting. So it's a different feel. But if the future of the NFC North is, who knows, at the Vikings and Lions, but like a Fields Love sort of rivalry game, that's great. That's fun. That's fun for everyone.
Yeah. So let's talk about how you can take your defense to the next level with one of our sponsors, and then we will flip it over to the offense when we come back. It's football season, baby. And you know what that means? It means we're going for two here with the sponsors of today's show, Manscaped. Blitzing through hairs has never been easier, and it's time for you to join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code PWSS20 at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. It's 3 and out the window with all other trimmers. Now go tame that Wildcat offense.
The world is starting to open, and the Performance Package 4.0 from Manscaped is here to help you get ready. Inside, you'll find their brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, plus 2 free gifts, Performance boxer briefs, and the Shed travel bag.
The brand new Lawnmower 4.0 is here to take your defense to the next level.
Get 20% off and free shipping with the code PWSS20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code PWSS20. Stiff arm your pubes out of the playoffs this year with Manscaped. And we're back. Thanks, Manscaped.
Yeah.
let's talk offense now.
Yeah. Wow. I have so many thoughts about the offense. So in case, I guess I'll give a little background on what I do during my rewatches, if that's fun, if people care about that. I don't know.
Let's do it.
But I break it down by quarter and I write down every personnel package that the Packers trot out, just because I think there's a lot of really interesting patterns that emerge. And I just think also like the evolution of what Matt LaFleur calls based off of this is really interesting over the course of the game. And as many people were, maligning on Twitter, they came out in so much spread, so much 11 personnel at the beginning of the game. And now I don't understand. And Matt LaFleur didn't really give me an answer that I appreciated during the press conference. Thank you to Aaron Nagler for answering or asking this question. What I don't understand is, and you and I have talked about this, when you don't have David Bakhtiari out there, and this is no hate on Elton Jenkins, but when you don't have David Bakhtiari out there and you're asking your tight ends to do a lot when it comes to blocking, and you're up against a Bears front that has, they're number 3 in the league, enough said, why are you putting your guys in those positions? Like the offense isn't built that way. It isn't built to run that way. And I just have a really hard time with it. Now, he said it's because, they use those guys to chip edge rushers, but that only works if it works. And when you've got Tunyon and DeGuara missing those, then everything gets blown up in the backfield. In quarter 2, 3, and 4, right, it was a lot more balanced between 11, 12, and 21. And I just find the Packers offense runs so much better when it's out of the latter 2 personnel groupings. When Jones and Dillon are both on the field, when you've got 2 tight ends, Mercedes Lewis most notably, they run the ball really effectively. They get play action off really effectively. It's just, so I don't know. I guess my question really is why even start the game that way?
Yeah. And I don't know. This is something that Dusty Evely, if you're watching, we would love to have you back on Packed What She Said to talk about this. But, last season with him, we looked at the idea of setting up so many of these packages and so much motion, so much play action, and how you can use that later on. I don't know if there's something with hey, we've got some spread, mesh concepts that we want to work in. So right now we need to set them up and make defenses aware of them so we can burn them with something different later on. But I absolutely agree with you. I think Tunyon's having a rough start to the year. And I think a lot of that is being asked to chip guys like Nick Bosa and TJ Watt every week. You're not doing the thing that is your favorite thing to do on the field, which can be challenging. And I know these are all team player kind of guys, but Lazard, EQ, all of them are being asked to do a ton of blocking. And that's challenging because, Josiah DeGuara had one where he just completely whiffed and didn't even hit who he was supposed to be blocking. He just kind of bounced off of him like a bumper car. Yeah. And, that sets you up then for a couple yards lost and can really stall a drive. So yeah, I know that I thought that was probably the most jarring thing on the rewatch was just a tough game for the tight ends not named Mercedes Lewis.
And I think too, part of me also, because I do this a lot, devil's advocate, is with Allen Lazard on the field, you are getting a little bit of a pseudo tight end because he is such a good blocker, but that's not what you want out of your wide receivers when you're also missing MVS, and you're having to call up EQ. And I also wonder, and I guess maybe this is just coming to mind now and I want your thoughts, is does this offense actually not run as effectively without MVS? Because there's no one really to take the top off. There's no one to stretch the defense. Look, Tay can do everything. That I think that's a side, right?
Yeah.
That's the asterisk on this is sure. Devontae Adams can do everything. He can get the deep ball, etc. But MVS's specific role, I think, is so integral here. And I really think they're missing him.
Yeah, because I think the easiest thing to do when MVS is gone is to play cover 2, and you always have safety help over Tay, and then you have no threat of the deep ball. And we've talked about this, on these live recaps every week. I really want MVS and Randall Cobb on the field at the same time, because I think we're going to get some really creative looks there. The way that they talked about AJ Brown yesterday with Bills Titans and how he just kind of feasts in the middle between the numbers of the defense. Like he takes that soft spot, and that's always where he gets his chunk plays. I think you're going to see Randall Cobb doing a lot of that because you'll have, like you said, MVS will carry a safety with him, or if it's man, he'll open up somebody else kind of in a crosser. So yeah, I mean, hopefully he's back this week. It's cheating to say that, but I think it's a significant loss. But let's talk about the run game.
Okay.
If you're okay with that, because I thought the run game opened up so much.
Yes.
So much.
I mean, Dylan had the longest run of his career, which is kind of hard to believe thinking about the Titans game last season. You would have thought that it would have come during that game, but it was this game. I just think they're running the ball so effectively right now. And I feel like the rest of the league is really starting to notice how good the Jones-Dylan tandem is.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the things too in Matt LaFleur, like we talked about this after week 1, and we saw it like a little bit first half of the Lions where we're like, oh no, what's he doing? It feels like he's going away from the run, even when they're down. And, you and I have talked about this ad nauseum throughout Matt LaFleur's entire career in Green Bay is like, when this team is down, how do they respond? And I think the maturity and the growth of Matt LaFleur as a head coach is sticking to his playbook and knowing what works. And what works, especially this season, without a burner in your offense, or in your arsenal, is running the ball with Jones and Dylan because they keep you accountable.
Right, exactly. And I think, look, there's a lot of debate on what the run game brings to the table in terms of like specific offenses, but I think there's a couple of reasons in my mind why Jones and Dylan are so perfect. First of all, they're completely complementary backs to one another, and they bring such different things to the table. And I think that's why I want to see so much more 21 personnel and pony packages, because you have to account for so much when both of them are on the field. But they both are big playmakers in very different ways, right? Dylan can just truck through you, but he had like a couple of nice jukes, but Jones is so like impossible to take down in the open field. And I just think when it comes to, look, Aaron Rodgers' deep ball accuracy this season is down a lot. He's taken shot plays on first and second down that I'd love to stop doing. They're not working. And I don't know if that's because MVS isn't on the field or what the deal is, or if it's just that he's 37. I don't know. But you want a running game like the Packers have for an Aaron Rodgers, because you want to, first of all, keep the defense honest, and you don't want the young offensive line to be pass protecting like the entire game and having Aaron Rodgers just throw, even though he probably could. And that's how you move. It's just how you move the chains. I don't know. You want to keep Aaron Rodgers in the pocket, and you want to have an effective run game. There was one formation that I loved, which I hadn't seen in a while. And I'm surprised it was Tunyon and not DeGuara, because I think this is more of a DeGuara role. But there was a Tunyon Jones I formation in the backfield where Tunyon was more of like that H-back, like blocking for him. And I guess maybe that's also a Dominique Daphne type role. But Jones broke off like a huge run out of stuff like that. And I think that's when you use the tight ends and the running backs like the most effectively.
Yeah, it's when it's not that spread out offense that we're, annoyed by. But yeah, I mean, I think Lucas Patrick said it really well too. Like, he said Soldier Field has one of the longest grass lengths in the NFL. So there's always kind of that initial surge. Like you said, it's built for defenses because you can get your footing, and it's harder to kind of react to some of that stuff on the longer grass. So he said that he felt like they did a really good job kind of withstanding the initial surge. Obviously, the big three all still got their sacks, Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack, and Robert Quinn. But then he was like, we felt after we kind of withstood it that we were able to kind of push the pocket a little bit, which is something I think that was missing from the first quarter. So just kind of the dance that goes into that too. And I think that's maybe why the Packers have started a little bit slower, is they're going up against some really dominant fronts. And that's, again, why guys like Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon are so important. Not to the effect of a Derrick Henry that we saw on Monday Night Football, but if A.J. Dillon is running at you repeatedly, at some point you're going to get tired. And you're, those chunk plays, we saw him close out the fourth quarter, just multiple runs up the gut with A.J. Dillon because they weren't able to bring him down. And that's how you burn clock.
Exactly. And especially like the Packers play so much better when they're up, which we know. And so when you have a back like that, just run it out, get a couple of first downs and run it out. I do think like we have to talk about the offensive line. because yet another shuffling and yet another week where they played very well. Look, Aaron Rodgers was sacked 3 times, but I don't think that's like completely indicative of the way the line played. And I think kudos to Lucas Patrick for coming in very early in the game. I hope Josh Myers is okay. But again, they just keep shuffling and keep doing their jobs. It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, there's really something to be said about Adam Stenovich and Luke Butkus and the way that these guys are, you know, Elton Jenkins can play anywhere. We've seen it. Billy Turner has played multiple positions. He can play anywhere, probably except center. You know, you've got Lucas Patrick who can play guard or center. So just to have pieces that can mix at any spot, even John Runyon Jr., you know, knock on wood, if something happened to Lucas Patrick, he was taking center snaps all preseason. So, you know, I think that they do a really good job cross-training these guys as well so that, you know, you're hoping, you know, when you come back, obviously it's David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, the right guard spot. I'm really actually questioning maybe is that going to be Royce Newman? Will JRJ slide over? Because I know Newman wanted out of camp, but if they're talking about it being an open competition, I thought John Runyon Jr. has played some really, really good football at left guard.
Yeah. I think it's not the worst problem to have for that to be a competition, right? For the rest of the season. I don't know. It's interesting because I was watching the Steelers game the other night and it was, you know, they're talking about how the Steelers just continuously find these amazing like edge rushers. Like there's like certain things that each team are just like very good at scouting. And the Packers are very good at scouting offensive linemen. Like very, very good. Yeah. I mean, we went into this offseason thinking that was a position of weakness. We went to camp thinking it was a position of weakness, not knowing what these draft picks would bring. And now all of a sudden there's this like abundance of starting potential offensive linemen. It's impressive.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like not to get on a soapbox or anything because, you know, that's not what this is for. But I do think it's really interesting that the Packers always, you know, prioritize offensive line. And when you have Brett Favre and you have Aaron Rodgers and you're hoping, you know, to set up an offensive line someday for a guy like Jordan Love, you know, you want the offensive line to be a strength.
Yeah.
So not to like, you know, make fun of the Bears or anything, but they've had a challenge. It's been kind of a revolving door along the offensive line. And that does make it harder for guys like Justin Fields. You know, Trey Lance has a decent offensive line now in San Fran, but, you know, Lamar Jackson struggled with his offensive line for a couple seasons. So, you know, if that's not a priority, look at Joe Burrow. I think he's the best example. Tears his ACL and now has a great wide receiver, but still is lacking some protection along the offensive line. So I just think it's a testament to like, if you're always, you know, making sure your offensive line is one of the positions of strength on your offense, then you always are kind of setting yourself up for regardless who's back there.
Yeah.
You can find success.
100%. Now that you say that, and this is probably a topic for the off seasons, we can write this down, but I'm just wondering what the offensive line looks like with Jordan Love back there because he's such a different quarterback. But the offense only scored 24 points. So I know, like, right, we talked about how the Bears defense is one of the best in the red zone. So 24 points against the Bears defense is high and very good. But they're not as explosive this season, right? Like last year, we saw a 40 burger already. They were scoring, I think they were averaging like 31, 32 points in the first half of the season. What's different this year, do you think?
I think MVS is a big piece of it. But yeah, last season they ended with 31.8 average points per game. This year they're in 15th right now in the league. But yeah, I mean, I think MVS is a huge factor. I think the deep ball, those shots are, you know, missing. And I think maybe that's why we're seeing, it kind of feels like there's an urgency with Rodgers and he is kind of taking what's in front of him. I think Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon have really kind of helped with that, but it feels like he wants to get it going. Like he knows. And I think once he connects on one or two, you know, we're going to kind of see it then for the rest of the season. But it just feels like every game there's a couple near misses and those just seem like they eat at him more than anything else when you look at his facial expressions on the field.
Yeah. I kind of wish that, I know this is a dumb thing to say maybe, but I kind of wish he wouldn't care, right? Like you'd think at this point, at least the way he expresses where he's at in his career is he doesn't care about stats. He doesn't care about his own personal gain, anything like that. He just cares about winning. And so if that's truly how he feels, you would think he would just start to take the check downs, take what's in front of him, move the chains methodically, stay in the pocket. That's when the Packers offense looks its best. And they usually go 3 and out when Aaron Rodgers tries to push the ball down the field this season for whatever reason. So I'm just wondering why they keep sticking with that, especially with MVS out. And even with MVS in, it's not like they connect probably like 50% of the time. So I don't know. I'm curious how they like kind of self-scout this and maybe change things.
Yeah. And before we, kind of wrap this, I am curious your thoughts on this. And again, this could be like a different conversation for a different day, but do you think that we're seeing him be more aggressive with the ball this year and, leading to some of those turnovers? Or do you think it's just that guys aren't on the same page? Like it sometimes feels like, I thought against the Bears, there were a couple lucky throws that it was like, okay, good. It fell dead. Or like it was just out of reach. And I guess I'm just not used to seeing him play that kind of football.
Yeah, that's interesting because he's typically very conservative and you normally see him with like a lot more throwaways. And I think instead of throwing the ball away, he's just taking a shot down the field instead. And like if it was a throwaway, we would think nothing of it. We'd be like, okay, no one was open. But instead it just looks like a poor decision or an incomplete pass. I'd be curious to see the stats on that, actually, what his throwaways versus deep ball incompletions are this season.
Yeah, and I mean, I think some of that could be like accounting for, the jumbling at offensive line and not having maybe as much protection as he's used to or the cleanest pocket. But I think, all things considered, his pocket has been pretty clean. He's got one of the best lines, as run and pass blocking goes through 6
Yeah, they're
games,
top 10, I think, right now, right? In both categories. I don't know. I think he's also holding on to the ball a little bit longer in some situations, and his stats, I think it's 2.5 seconds. When it's less than that, he's like near perfect. And when it's longer than that, he's I think he, in his mind, he's still like one of the greatest scramblers there is. He used to make those insane throws on the run. He'd extend plays like nobody's business. I'm not sure that that's his strength anymore. And that can maybe be a hard thing to let go of.
I thought it was also interesting the use of Randall Cobb. You had put it on Twitter that we didn't see him get a single catch against the Bears. And I don't know if a lot of that was because they were playing like really heavy with Lazard and Tunyon, and you wanted guys chipping and blocking, and it's not necessarily Cobby's strength, even though he's good at it. It's just he's not one of your bigger bodied guys. But I think like Cobb really is kind of a security blanket on offense, and if he's not on the field, the scrambling and the ability to kind of make plays happen for Rodgers isn't always there.
That's a good point, because you think about Rodgers doing that with guys like Jordy and Cobb and James Jones, and I don't know if he has that relationship with anyone other than Devontae at this point. And I mean, Devontae's still getting open and they're still scheming him open, but it is a lot less of that like improvisation. Oh, something to keep an eye on the rest of the season, I guess. All right, final thoughts. I just thought this was a really solid win. Really solid win. I hope they get healthier. I mean, anybody back would be great. King's not going on IR, which we heard this week from LaFleur, which is probably a good sign. Little cryptic on Jair, just healing nicely, whatever that means. But Bakhtiari coming back is huge. It's going to be huge for the offense. I think him being out has just been like a trickle-down effect of changes. So on to Washington.
Yeah, thought the offense, was more aggressive in the red zone. Got to see some creativity, like the Lazard shovel pass. Loved that. It seems like, the team keeps talking about, every year there's a slogan. And I think this year the mentality really is next man up. Everybody says it. Aaron Jones keeps saying each week, like, we have the guys in the locker room. We have the leaders to get this done. And I think that the team really kind of feels it and believes it. And I think that we're seeing that each week with like the character wins. Aaron Rodgers has said that at least 4 or 5 times after these games, where like these are character wins by character guys, and this is how you put it all together.
Yep.
So, yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. No questions today or comments. I'm surprised. Anyway, we'll be back with our normal preview show for the Washington football team. It'll drop probably Friday, like normal. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on Twitch, follow us on everywhere for updates. As always, we are hoping to have a couple of guests on the podcast coming up. So that'll be fun. Like Maggie said, maybe we'll get Dusty on. Dusty's the best. And as always, do not forget, Go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.